today we're going to be talking about racism within the rainbow. We're really excited to be joined by three really wonderful guests, all experts within their own field. I'll quickly introduce you to our guests. Looking at the screen on your bottom right is Dr. S. Shelvan. We're incredibly lucky to have Dr. Shelvan with us for this important debate. Shelvan is a globally recognized legal expert on refugee and human rights claims based on sexual or gender identity and expression. He's been instructed on cases in the UK up to and including the Supreme Court and the Strasbourg Court. He's currently lecturing at Southampton Uni on refugee law. And like I said, we're so delighted that you can join us today, Dr. Shelvan. Thank you very much. Joining us, looking at the top left, is Maria Exel. Maria is a hugely respected trade unionist and LGBT+ activist. She holds the honor of recently being the TUC president, and in doing so, she became the first out lesbian to be TUC president. She's also a very proactive advocate on the faith, homophobia and transphobia scene, helping to build important bridges between those groups. Welcome to the show, Maria. And finally, down on the bottom left-hand screen that you're looking at, delighted to introduce Taranjit Chana. Taranjit is a leading LGBTQ+ anti-racist activist who sits on various TUC equality committees and was the first South Asian woman to chair the TUC LGBT+ conference. I think that was in 2022, Taranjit. And she's also one of the founders of Black and Brown Rainbow, which is a peer-led grassroots organization advocating for social justice and anti-violence to end violence against Black and Brown LGBTQIA+ people. So welcome all. Thank you for joining us for this important debate. The question of racism in the rainbow is a debate which a lot of people within the spectrum, a lot of people of color in the spectrum have been debating for a while. Shelvan, if we can start with you. Racism is a societal problem, and we know it extends deep into different pockets of areas that some people wouldn't traditionally associate with it being very evident. But how big a problem do you think racism is within the rainbow? And can you share any personal experiences of encountering racism within the LGBTQ+ community or witnessing it happening to others?
That's almost a thesis title, isn't it, Fezzi? First of all, thank you, CW, for inviting me to participate in this. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing, lively discussion with an amazing colleagues and comrades involved in it. So my name's Shelvan. I'm queer, a person of color, a first-generation immigrant. I live with disability. My affirmed pronouns are he and him. And why do I provide you that intro? Because I think it's really important that part of the queer POC narrative is embedded in visibility. I came here when I was 4 years old. I'm going to be turning 50 in September. I know, great moisturizer. But the point being is that the UK, which I grew up in, where racism was very much at the forefront of daily lived experience with, in terms of Paki and other derogative terms used, and my parents sort of swapping the television screen channel whenever Enoch Powell used to come on TV. We had a wonderful golden age, if I may put it in that, from sort of the noughts 2000 onwards, where we were starting to get our rights. We had the ban on gay men and lesbians in the armed forces being turned over by courts, and I went to become a barrister because I wanted to empower myself as a queer person of color. We've now seen within our own community, within the LGBTQ+ community, there are people within our community who want to be divisive, and through their own actions and separating out from the T and the Q from the LGB, we've seen a lot of the old institutional racism through the division. You just need to be able to look at it from the perspective of my own individual narrative. Is that for me as a person of color to do the work I did, I knew, as is the narrative of a lot of people of color, is that we have to be the best in the room to be in the room. And it's a continual pressure from a professional viewpoint that you always have to reinvent yourself, even though we are the greatest examples of imposter syndrome. I mean, I have imposter syndrome all the time, is that to be in the room, you always have to fight that. And I remember doing a conference in 2010 as my example of a European conference called Fleeing Homophobia Conference, and there were representatives from 26 nations in the room, and myself and only another person, the representative of Belgium, were the only people of color. And this is a refugee conference. And to be able to redress the balance, you know, an organization brought, you know, people of color, queer, refugees. Now, that was very important to have the refugee voice. But I think what's happened now is that we've had to take the cloak of victimhood to be able, within the queer community, to create our space. And what I want to see is a change of always having to share the narrative of victimhood within the queer community to be able to create our space, to actually having our space governed by ourselves. And that's why it's so important to have these safe spaces. I'm a huge supporter of UK Black Pride. It's important to have our own queer people of color spaces, because what's happened from the name calling, it's the microaggressions. It's the, you know, the conversations outside in the corridor, the way things are organized, which has been the main perpetrator regarding the situation. Because of course, they're more than happy to have the person on the cover story of a magazine or a news story where it's been an oppressive narrative, which is important that we do share and we learn and we heal and we provide that space for people to be able to grow. But we also need to be able to reclaim our space within the community without being divided. And I think that's what's really important, is that from the name calling, we've had the microaggression. We very much have a stereotype of what people of color should look at. They're very much sexualized in a lot of communities, which has been a huge issue. But I think we are learning, but we need to unite together to speak out, because it's all too easy to be silent. When you see on social media, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later on in the media and social media, that there are a lot of people with a lot of power because they've got perceived power, because they have money, and and they have a voice and they create noise. And the important thing is that for our own well-being, you know, I'm one of those exponents. That I have taken sometimes to self-silence myself, not to get involved in the discussion, because on the one part of the scale is the need to be able to be the advocate, which I am 24 hours 7 in my day job, but also preserve my own well-being, my own sanity, not to have to deal with the pile-on, the hate, the poison, the marginalization, which is largely untrue, but is required to be able to participate in the debate. So what I'd like to see, I think a takeaway, if I can start the session by saying, is that we reclaim not only our streets, but our safe spaces, and empower ourselves, and not allow division to reign where those people wish there to be division. And as you can see from the flag behind me, have that progress pride flag, proudly visible, and ensure that we're not silent. So yeah, I see a regression through my own lifetime, my own lived experience, but I think we all have enough energy to ensure that, because of the spectrum, we see that with, God, I'm going to say the younger generation, the ability not to have labels is magical. It's beautiful. I speak to a lot of my the children of my friends who are now, going off to university. And, they have genderqueer, trans, much more fluid, gender fluid, sexual fluid identities. And I think we have a role to play ensuring that not only their safe space is protected, but they grow.
That's a really powerful start to this discussion, Shelvan. Thanks for that. I think there's already so many questions I want to ask you, but we'll come on to those if we get a bit of time. later. Taranjit, I want to come to you next in terms of, you know, and answer you. How do you think the LGBTQ plus community can be more actively anti-racist and address issues of racism within its own spaces? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for